Hey guys, welcome. So this is the agenda for this video. We are going to learn all these topics and then we are going to jump into the code and we'll do some coding as well. So let's see what we have on the plate. So we'll see what is JSON. JSON is structure, JSON arrays objects, what are HTTP calls, what is main thread, background thread, Google JSON. Then we have some design patterns, LiveData, ViewModels, coroutines, view binding, retrofit. So that's a lot, and eventually we are going to create just this, an image and a text view. Well, yes, that's it. But this will be coming from the server at least. So the main objective of this video is to learn these design patterns, LiveData, ViewModels, or how to use them. And the other objective is to learn how to parse JSON. So keeping these two objectives in mind, let's see my deck. So let's first understand what is JSON. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's a lightweight data interchange format, easy to understand, and it's language independent. So this is how generally a normal JSON looks like. We have these curly braces with some arrays and objects and key value pairs inside. Now JSON structure has two parts. It has JSON objects and arrays. JSON objects can contain key value pairs or other objects or other arrays. They are denoted with these curly braces, and JSON arrays can contain other objects. They are denoted with this square brackets. Again, JSON objects represented by curly brackets, key value pairs. So they can contain key value pairs like name, Avengers, that's a string, and we have another key value pair that is year, that is the key, and it's an integer. They are separated by a colon, as you can see, key value, and the pairs are separated by a comma. So that is how JSON reads. The JSON compiler reads how this JSON will be divided into key value pairs. And then we'll be making some HTTP calls in Android. So we'll be using HTTP URL connection class to send data and so on, but eventually we'll be switching to Retrofit to see how that works. And then we will have a problem that I'll discuss with coroutines. Then we have Gson, and we have this MVVM architecture. So we'll be following this repository pattern here, where we will have an activity. We will have ViewModels, LiveData, and these ViewModels and LiveData will be interacting with the repository. Repository will decide where the data and how the data will be fetched, and then it will be displayed on the UI. So what is ViewModel? Let's start with ViewModel. So ViewModel is a class that is designed to store and manage UI related data in a lifecycle conscious way. So why do we want to save data in ViewModel? The problem with saving data in an activity is that activity is just a UI container. You are not supposed to save data in an activity, because an activity can get destroyed, can get recreated. There are multiple things that can happen with an activity, and in that scenario your data will get lost, because if an activity is recreated, no data, boom. So we will use this container ViewModel to store our data, because if an activity gets destroyed, the ViewModel survives. So you will have your data in a proper state. So for example, a screen rotation will destroy data in an activity, but in a ViewModel it will stay. We'll be using LiveData, which is an observable data class holder. So this is again will be used in conjunction with the ViewModels. It is lifecycle aware, so that means that it will know when an activity gets created or destroyed, or what is happening with an activity, or how the things are going on. So in an observer pattern, we have a subject and we have observers. So the subject notifies the observers by directly calling one of their methods, and subject knows who is observing. So basically it has a list of all the observers which are observing, and he will only notify those observers who are observing. you will not notify any observer who is not observing. So you can think of a auction event, like the auctioneer knows that who is observing, because bidders raise their bids by showing some sign, right? And then auctioneer can respond back. So there are people sitting, but there are some observers and there are some normal people who are not observing at all. So auctioneer will only say only will react to the people or to the observers who are bidding. Will not just randomly pick anyone. Okay, you got it. So that's the overall thing. And after that, so now let's jump into the code. So I'll be creating a new project, empty activity next. I'll name it JSON demo. Yep, let's finish. Okay, so the first topic that I'm going to cover is view binding. Now, what is view binding? So as per Android, we have view binding, that is now the recommended behavior. Previously we used find view by IDs or Kotlin synthetics, but they are not all, none of them is now recommended. It's just this view binding. So how this view binding works, in your build.gradle you mention this build feature that the view binding is true. What it's going to create, it's going to do is it's going to create a class with your XML name, and you can basically use that to find your views. So you see activity main, it's now activity main binding, so you don't need that. Instead what you need is binding activity main binding inflate binding dot root. That's it. Now let's go to our, okay, we have a text view here that doesn't have an ID, so let's give it an ID, TV hello. And before doing that, let's run this project for once, and I can say binding dot TV hello dot text equals to some new text to show some new text maybe. So let me see if this is running. So we see hello world. Now run it again with the view binding, some new text. So with view binding you can find these views like this. Now the next step is we are going to use the new architecture components that are ViewModels, LiveData and so on, and for these I need to pull in some new dependencies. So let me quickly copy these dependencies. How do I went from there to here? Just like I just searched ViewModel dependency Android and it landed me here, in case you are wondering. So these two dependencies are of my use, others not so much as of now. So I'll put these two dependencies, one for ViewModel, one for LiveData. Now what's up with ViewModel LiveData? I already told you that these ViewModels and LiveData are lifecycle aware, that they will make your life easier in the long run. So let me create a package named VM. I'll create a ViewModel here. Let's name it main ViewModel. It will be a class that extends to ViewModel like this and this. That's it. We just have a new ViewModel here. Now how this is going to interact with my activity? Well, that's how you do it. ViewModel private latent var ViewModel main ViewModel, and then you write something like ViewModel equals to ViewModel provider this dot main ViewModel class.java. How do we make sure that this is working? Well, we already have some data here, right? And we don't want to keep the data in the activities. So let's remove this data. Let's put this data into our ViewModel. Okay, so the shortcut here is Alt Enter, and then you create a let me create a member. Yes, that's right. And the member will have this data. It should be equals, and that's it. So now the text will come from here, some new text from ViewModel. Let's run it. Now in case our activity gets destroyed, we will have the latest data in here, and our ViewModel will be there until unless its use is completely over. I mean, if we finish the activity, the ViewModel will also get destroyed, but if the activity gets recreated for some reason, then the ViewModel, the older ViewModel will stay. This ViewModel will stay and will get the data. So this data is now coming from the ViewModel. So that was ViewModel. Now let's talk about the design that we were discussing earlier. So what we are going to do is we are going to parse the JSON, and we want to show the data on the UI like an image and a text view. But how to do it properly, the correct way? Now we discussed about repository pattern, so we'll use that. So I create a package name source. I create a new class here that is data repository, and this is our repository. Now this repository will be used in our ViewModel. So ViewModel will have a reference to it. It will be private. Data repository, yes, this one, data repository. And in our main activity, we want to display that movie name, right? This was our JSON, so we want to show this movie name and an year and this image. So let's ask our ViewModel to provide that. So we ask our ViewModel to fetch movie, and let's put it on hold because now we need a lot more components for it to work. So let's first start with the contract. I'll create another package that is API maybe, and I'll create another class that is, let's say, movies API. This is a class. This should be an interface. Now this interface says, okay, one more thing, we need to create models as well. So let's create another package that is model. Now model is it's outside, yes. So we want to create a model for our movies class, and we have something called data classes in Kotlin that allows you to create POJOs that we have in Java. So we will have these getters and setters all created, and they will be less code to write. Now this is what we are trying to create JSON for, the POJOs, the models for. Let's put this thing here just for reference, and let's analyze. So at the top level we have a JSON object, then we have a JSON array, then we have another JSON object. This is the last entity, so let's create this first. We'll call it movie. What does it have? It have a private movie string. Make sure that the name is same as given here, otherwise it will not work. Just for now, we have ways to make it work with different name as well, but for now make sure that the name is same. The last thing is image. Okay, so we have created this part. Now we need to create this. This is, we already know that it is something, it's array or list, right? So can we use list? Yeah, we can. We'll write well movies, and it's a list of type movie. This name should also be same that you have given here, and we need an outer level object. This is going to take care of that. So we have this movies object that is going to return a list of movies, and they will have data inside it. And now we have our POJOs ready. Let's go back to our API. Now our API will have a method that will return get movies, and it will return movies. So that's pretty much it. Now the next thing we will see is how to put it all together. So we have an API here, but we need an implementation. So this is just a contract, right? And why we are creating this contract? So that we can have multiple implementations, and we will have ways to switch to implementations if we want to, without removing or changing much of our code. So let's create our implementation for this movies API. So first what we are going to do is we are going to parse this JSON manually from scratch, and then we'll use the latest APIs that are Gson and Retrofit, so that we can see how these two APIs will make our life easier in the long run. So where do I create an implementation? In the source, let's say I have another class which is manual parsing implementation. It has to implement the movies API, otherwise it's not worth creating all of this stuff. Now let's return something stupid here. Let's return movies with the list of movie, something like some random movie, and we have to provide an year. Year will be 1990, or image, I don't have any image. So this is just dummy implementation as of now for our movies, just to see that how it's going to work with our repository. So let's go back to our repository. Now how this connection is going to go is, our activity will ask for our ViewModel to fetch us some movies. Our ViewModel will ask the repository to provide it. Okay, it's not going to take care of how it's going to come from or where it's going to come from. So the repository must know that how to get the movies. So we'll write a method here that is fun get movies, that is going to return movies. And the repository is not going to do it itself, because we have created interfaces. We are going to use an interface here that is private val movies API. So movies API dot get movies, this is going to be returned. Now we can go back to our ViewModel. Now our ViewModel can ask our data repository to get movies and return it. And this fetch movie we can use in our ViewModel. Fetch movie, so this is just one movie, so we'll tweak a bit in our ViewModel that we want the first item. let's make it movie because we want only the first item, right? And we can use it in our main activity like fetch movie dot movie name. Okay, this is one problem, that data repository needs an implementation of movie API, but we just created it, right? So can we pass this manual parsing implementation into the data repository? Yes, we can, and let's run it, see if this works. Some random movie that is provided by our manual parsing implementation. So let me recap once again, because this is the most important stuff. Let's see how it is going on. Our activity or the UI is requesting our ViewModel to fetch us movies. Now our ViewModel is not providing the movies itself. It has access to a repository, and it's asking the repository to provide it for instead. Now this repository knows who is going to provide it, like just an interface abstraction here, that there is an interface, there's a contract that who is implementing movies API can be replaced here, and we have replaced with manual parsing implementation, and this way we get the movies and we reach all the way up to here, and this returns the value. Alright, so now let's see the next part, that is fetching the data from the server instead of returning some dummy object here, right? So to fetch the data from the server and to parse the JSON, I have to do something like this. So I need to use this URL code, that is I need to use a URL. This is my URL, and I'm going to create a variable with Ctrl+Alt+V. That's it. Now this URL dot open connection. So this is going to give me a connection object. So the shortcut for renaming a variable is Shift F6, that's in Windows, and connection dot connect. So once I'm connected to this endpoint here, I can use a buffered reader to read input stream. So I'll use buffered input stream, which will take connection dot get input stream, right? And this buffered input stream can be read by through a reader. Buffered input stream, do we have reader? We have a buffered reader, and this buffered reader can give us lines. So for lines in line in buffered reader dot read lines, we can read the content line by line, but we need to save it into something called a string buffer, so that we can append it line by line. Once we are done, we want to close the reader. Yes, why not? Once you open, you need to close it, right? And we have all the data here. So we have, well, full JSON read into string buffer dot toString. So we have the full JSON here. Now let's talk about Json parsing. How do we parse JSON? So it's pretty simple. We will see what we have here, and we will see how we can read it, right? So first we have a JSON object, so we will write, well, JSON object movies, and this is a JSON object, so we will say full JSON. We have read the first line. Now from the first line we know that the second item that we have is a JSON array, So JSON object movies dot get JSON array. And what is the name of the JSON array? We know that it's movies. So let's put it. We have a JSON array. Now from this JSON array, we know from our JSON that there is another object. So let's find JSON array dot get JSON object. But this time we need to provide an index here, right? So the index is 0 because this is the first item. So we'll provide 0 here. JSON object. Okay, let's call it JSON object movie. And now we have reached here, so we can extract all these 3 entries here one by one with the methods that we have. So first is movie name. We can get it JSON object movie dot get string. I was thinking of renaming it to be a bit shorter, but that's fine. Let's duplicate this. So the second thing is get int, because the second one is an year, and the third one is an image, right? So this will be an image. Now we can create a movie object with these 3 values, right? Movie name, year, and image. Okay, can I put these in a single line? That is again alt enter, put it in a single line. I mean, I like it that way. So will this work? Just one thing before we go there, that is, to hit the internet we need internet permission. Yep, that's it. So manual parsing is done, everything is done. Will it going to work? Well, it won't, because we are trying to hit something on the server, on the main thread. Now how this threading concept comes in, so just see the error, guys, once, so that you are aware when you are doing some stuff related to this one. You see an error that is network on main thread exception. Why we are running the network calls on main thread? Let's take it to the background thread, and let me switch that slide to, yep. So here is the problem. There's a slide that I missed. Android doesn't allow us to make network calls on the UI thread. Also, it doesn't allow us to change anything on the UI if you are on a background thread. So now you are stuck, right? You cannot make calls on the UI thread. You cannot change anything on the background thread. So you have to switch from one thread to another. All right. Now we will use something called coroutines in Kotlin. So let's add some coroutines here. So to add this coroutines Kotlin dependency, let's see if we have to add any dependency for this library. And yes, we do. So we will go back to here and we will add this coroutine. Never mind. So let's sing this, and now the whole thing is running on the main thread. How do we switch it to the background thread? Well, we'll do it from the base. So we will ask anyone who is providing the implementation of this method to be done on a background thread, just for the argument, because why not? So we have something called suspend keyword here, which is saying that this method is suspended, and it can run on any thread, like a main thread or even on a background thread, and the coroutine will decide whether it's running on a main thread or a background thread, but we can mark our method suspended. Now once we mark that method suspended, we have to mark this one as well, and once we mark this method suspended, this will start complaining. So we have to mark this suspend as well. So we have propagated this suspend keyword all the way up to our ViewModel. Now ViewModel is saying that This is again a suspended function. You need to give us something like how to execute this, right? So ViewModel will not give it back to the activity, I mean in this example at least. So what we are going to do, we are going to use coroutines. So coroutines provide us this ViewModel scope in ViewModels, and we have lifecycle scope in activities, and with this we can launch anything. So we want to run this code, this piece of code on a background thread, and how we do that, we can use with context, we can use something called dispatchers. So dispatchers dot default IO main and whatever. So IO is our input output and main is our main thread. So we'll use output, that is a worker thread, that is a background thread as well, and we'll say depper this thing is like this. This doesn't work, fetch movie doesn't work. Okay, we'll simply say well movie. Yep, so we get a movie here. So all this code is going to run on the background thread, and this ViewModel launch, this is a coroutine scope, will make sure that it is running. But how do we now propagate this data that we have seen here back to the activity? Now this is running in the background thread, and our activity should the views should interact or show data in a main thread, otherwise that will not work, right? Will this Android won't allow us to change anything on the UI from the background thread. So now comes in the helper that is called LiveData. So LiveData will make sure that all this code gets back to our UI properly. So we will create a LiveData, that is movie LiveData, which is a mutable LiveData of type movie. We create an object like this, and this movie LiveData can be set with this piece of code. Now our main method does not return movie because the LiveData is taking care of that. So we have this fetch movie here, and go back to activity. Okay, so we have ViewModel.fetch movie, that's a method to fetch the movie, but we have something called ViewModel.LiveData, and we are going to observe this LiveData, and if something changes in that LiveData, we want to get notified. And how we will be notified? It will return us a movie object. So all this code goes here. So we have ViewModel.fetchMovie.movie. We don't have to write that. We can simply write it.movie because we will be returned this it. So everything has been moved from main thread to background thread just by this suspend function, and all the magic happened here. So we have this ViewModel scope. Now there is one more thing that is good about this ViewModel scope is this this scope is tied to the ViewModel. The scope will be cancelled when ViewModel will be cleared. So that means that we will clean up as well automatically. Once this activity gets destroyed and this ViewModel gets destroyed, this scope will get destroyed, and everything that is running inside that will also get destroyed automatically. So let's run this, see what happens. It says hello world and it says Avengers. Really? So the data is now coming from the API. Now you must be wondering, like, that is a lot of code we have to write just to show one single text on the screen. Well, yeah, but we are doing everything with the Scratch, so we can use libraries to do things quickly maybe. So well, let's first get rid of this stupid parsing code. And how we are going to do that? Through Gson. So we have this Gson library from Google, and this is this one. Come on. Let me put this here. So we have this Google code Gson. Now what does this Gson thing do? Now Gson provides a simple to Gson and from Gson methods to convert Java objects to JSON, or vice versa. And this is pretty simple and straightforward to use. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to write Gson. Yep, this is the one. Come on. Yep, Gson dot from JSON. We have our full JSON here, and what we need back is the movies object. Return this. That's it. Let's comment it out as well. So all this JSON parsing and everything will be done by Gson because we have provided proper POJOs in here. That how this Gson will look like. So the Gson know how these POJOs will look like. So the Gson know that this is a list of movies in which you will have a string, a year, and so on. And so this is one step. The other step is you don't want to make your calls yourself. Oh, I have run it or I didn't. I don't know. Let me run it. Let's see Gson in action. Any second now. Hello world, Avengers. Okay, so now our Gson is working. Excellent. Let's clean up. Control Shift Alt L, all at the same time to clean up. Now we don't want to write this type of code because this will be buggy eventually. We are going to use something called Retrofit. Now Retrofit is an API for HTTP client. It is type safe and it's for Java and Android, and it's cool. So how this works, you have to create an interface, and these interfaces are your API endpoints, and you have to create a retrofit builder. These two things that you need. There is a dependency here. Let me put it. So we have the latest version 2.9, and yeah, so retrofit is there. Now let's do some retrofit stuff. Let me create another package, name it retrofit, and the first thing is I'll be creating a retrofit API class. Now our movies API can be a reference to this interface, not class. So I can say movies API because this is our contract, right? So we can do like this, and all the stuff we can override. Now our retrofit can provide us a list of a movies object. For that we need to tell retrofit that it's a get call that you have to make to this endpoint, and we don't need to tell the full endpoint to the retrofit guy because we'll be providing a base URL in the builder. So the second thing I'll be needing is a class that is retrofit instance, and it will have well builder equals to retrofit dot builder dot base URL. So what I was talking to you is that we can provide the base URL here like this, so that we don't have to provide this URL again and again. And lastly, I want to call dot build method. So this is a builder pattern that we have just seen here, Now we need an instance here, so I'll say well service, and this will be a builder.create, and what type of service we need is the retrofit API. So this is some pretty standard stuff. We want it private, right? We don't want our builder to be exposed. Now we have a complete implementation of how to fetch the data from the API using retrofit, because it returns a retrofit API which is a movies API. So we can replace our manual implementation with retrofit. Retrofit instance dot retrofit instance dot, oh, we want it to be singleton, right? We don't want to create multiple instances of retrofit, right? So we want it to be singleton so that we can have just one instance. Now you see that all of our code that was there doesn't need to be changed. We have provided a completely different implementation by just changing one line of code. You want to see that in action? Let's run it. Okay, I think it crashed. Let's see why. Unable to create converter for class movies. Okay, so the last step is our retrofit does not know how to parse the objects. So we need to add a converter here, dot add converter factory, that is GSONConverterFactory. We need GSONConverterFactory. Okay, here we go. So we need this guy. Implementation. Yeah, that's it. Gson GSONConverterFactory. Okay, finally, and create. So now let's run this. Let's see our code in action. It works. So now we are fetching the data with retrofit, and we can completely dump this class that was manual parsing implementation, right? Because we are not using it anywhere, right? So all this line of code has been changed to retrofit API, its instance, and let me delete this guy, and we have everything in place. The last thing we will be needing is the image, right? So let's pull an image as well. So for that we need an image view, and we need to make some changes. So let's put in an image view here, anything, and let's do this, let's do that. Okay, let's align it here. Okay, let's give it some size, that is image view, give it width like 200 dp to 400 dp. I'm just doing that so that it does not get out of my emulator screen, because this text will, I mean, we are just doing it for the sake of loading an image. So I'll show you how to load an image. I'll be using glide for that. So glide We have a library that is called glide. I mean, there are lots of libraries, but you can use anyone. Glide allows you to load an image pretty fairly, as you can see here. This is how the image will get loaded by just one line of code. And let me put in glide here, sync it. Let's go back to our main activity. So glide work like this: glide dot with the current activity, load a URI it dot image dot into a target, that is binding dot image that we just created. That's it. So now glide will load our image on the screen. So you can see that image is there, Avengers text is there, and there is one more text that was coming, that was the ear. So let's add ear as well. So I'll say plus it dot ear. Now the last thing is Avengers 2012. The last thing we want to do is we want to see the complex JSON version and see how we can parse this. So we don't want to write all of this stuff ourselves, right? That will be quite hectic. And if you want to see this in action, you can see this one, like this is how it looks like. Can I scroll it, zoom it a bit? Yeah, okay. So we have multiple ways to do that. One is using a plugin. So let's search for plugins. JSON to Kotlin class. Okay, this looks promising. Let me install this. How do we use it? Alt K on Windows. Okay, let me press Alt K. All right, so we have this JSON. To be honest, I never used this plugin. I used a different one, but let's see. So the class name would be movies. Oh, it is creating this everything in here. I don't want to be created here. Let's go to model. Let's create a new class, movies automatic, maybe, I don't know. Let's try this here. Right, generate. So we have a movies automatic, which is a class of MOVY. Why is that MOVY? It doesn't matter. So list of movies, and then we have a cast, and you see all this heavy stuff is done by this guy, right? So what we can do is we can use this one. We can replace our classes with this, and we can use this data class, right? And we can delete this class maybe, because we have already. So we got the full JSON here. You want to print and see it on the emulator, that will work with this text. So if I use it dot toString, it should work. Movie cast null, director null, duration null, image is there, story, rating, tagline, year. Okay, so many things are coming null because we are hitting an endpoint that was this one. So let's hit this one. instead. In Retrofit API, we want to hit this endpoint, and let's change a bit of our implementation in data repo, because we know now we will be getting multiple items. So instead of getting the first item, let's try to fetch the third item for some reason, right? So let's see what happens. Where's the image? Okay, we have an image as well. So fantastic, movie cast. You see all the data is now coming up. We can use it as per our convenience, and we can show it properly. That's pretty much it. Let's sum it all up. So we used JSON, we used MVVM, we used ViewModels, we have seen LiveData, we've seen the problem HTTP calls, and we have seen JSON, and we have seen all these topics here. So I mean, that was it. I think I'll post these resources and code in the YouTube, in the video description, and if you have any questions, do comments and I'll reply you back. Thank you.